friends are asking you, how are you doing? And you're like, really well, thanks for, yeah, I'm doing great. And you can't blame your friends for acting like everything is great. Your parents ask you, how are things? And you say, good, everything's great. You can't blame them for acting like everything's great. You also can't blame them for being angry when they find out that things aren't. And you can't blame your friends when they find out that, when they feel betrayed because they find out that things weren't great. Someone says they love you and you tell them that you love them back just because it makes things simpler, just to make things simpler, just to make things simpler, 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 make things simpler. Don't be surprised at the end of all that simplicity, you find yourself in a really, really complicated life, having to undo all those things that you were doing because you thought it just made things easier. At the end of the day, at the end of a life, for sure, hopefully at the end of every day, literally, you can see how incredibly tangled everything becomes. And you can ask yourself, oh my God, how did things get like this? Because we tried to make life simpler. A simple life is not necessarily a good life. It's probably not. What's so funny? Everything. If you can look at it just the right way. You can't blame the world for thinking every day is Christmas if you're always telling them that it is. But having said that, I don't know. Maybe if you act like every day is Christmas, it will be. But yeah, sympathy, understanding, but you see the paradox there that if you are super sympathetic or you pretend to be these things, and like a person's going through something difficult and you're like, oh yeah, everyone goes through that, but not everyone goes through that. And then they think that they're totally normal, but as they go through life, they're gonna find themselves more and more alienated. Like, no, not everybody does go through that. There is something uniquely wrong with you. Or when, also in the other direction, a person can come to you and say, oh, I'm struggling with these, and they'll describe some intrusive thought. And then you're like, no, dude, I've never thought about just jumping off the Coronado Bridge. That's weird. Anybody here thought about jumping off the Coronado Bridge? Not like planning it, but just like going over the bridge. You're like, what would it be like to jump off this thing? What would it feel like? Okay, good. All right, as long as a couple of you guys are nodding, then I was gonna call you out. Yeah. Or you ever like, I don't know, go to Sunset Cliffs and look over and you're like, I could jump, I can do it, and you don't want to. But, you know, as long as you're not ditching school, it's probably okay. Don't do it if you can't swim, right? If you feign fake sympathy, if you feign or fake empathy, there's a reason you're doing it. Obviously, in your case, because you want the person to not get crazy on the trolley. But we also do it generally to try to connect with people. Now, a lot of times you're going to find that the emotions that we fake them because we're trying to connect with people. We're going to fake being sad because we want people to reach out to us, and we want people to have sympathy for us because we want to feel like we're somehow connected to them. We're going to fake, obviously, we're going to malinger fake illness because we want sympathy from a parent, because in that case we want to avoid something. But you're noticing that it's all dependent on manipulating this human connection that we have with people. In other words, none of this is ever going to work if the people don't care about you. So this is why, for example, if you haven't had this argument before, you will have this argument probably at some point in your life where you're going to be arguing with someone you care about, and they're going to say, you don't even love me. You don't even care about me. That person who tells you that is lying to you. They know that you love them, or that you at least care about them. Otherwise, making that statement would make no sense in the world. Do you go on the trolley and just to the person next to you, you don't even care about me, you don't even love me? Why not?
You don't know you.
Yeah, and so therefore?
Not like them.
Therefore? Do they love you?
No.
Do they care about you? No, because they don't know you. You would never say that to a person who doesn't love you or care about you. You're saying that because you're trying to get an affirmation from them. You want the person who you just told that to go, no, of course I do. Of course I care about you. Of course I love you. You're only saying that to people who you know, love, and care about you. You don't say it to strangers. You don't say that to enemies. You only say it to people who you know, love, and care about you. And so it's using your emotions, that exaggeration, as kind of like a wrench to try to get something out of them that you want. I guess a good question would be, why don't you just ask that person for the affirmation Why frame it as an accusation? And yesterday in one of my classes, there was two girls, they were talking about a guy that one of them is seeing, and she was talking, and I was laughing, and she was telling me about it. She's talking about all of these tests that she keeps putting him through, like to see how far she can push him until he gets super angry, how far she can push him before he, stops messaging her back, and she's like, I just want to kind of see what those boundaries are and how far I can push him. And her and her friend are laughing about this. And I'm like, you guys do this a lot? And they're like, yeah, they both do this. Why? Like, they know they can. Why? Because the person cares about them. What is it that they're really after? You might say, like, oh, they're cruel, they're evil, they're wicked. Yes. But they're also something else, which is insecure. They want to know what those boundaries and what those limits are. Because they want to know that those limits and boundaries, however far they are, they want to know the range in which they can operate. But moreover, they want to know, because if there's a range and a limit, that means that there's a person who cares about them. You can't have a range and a limit unless there's a person who actually cares about you. And that's what it really is. They want to see how far you can push this person. And so I mentioned to them that when you go back, like, for example, looking at child trauma, you see little kids who, well, not even little kids, even older kids, who will tell their parents, like, I hate you. Why would you tell your parent that? Because you genuinely hate them? No, especially with little kids. It's a test to see how far you can push things. Because what you want is the parent to show you, you can hate me if you want, but I still love you. That's how you find out what those limits and those boundaries of love are. If you grew up in a household where you told your mom and dad, I hate you, and they were like, we still love you, no matter what, you were reassured that there is such a thing as absolute or even unconditional love. If you grew up in a household where if you knocked over a glass of water, your parents would explode at you and yell at you and hit you, and they would, oh my God, you're such a problem, and they make you feel like you're a hassle to even have around the house as a little kid, you probably start to think that love has a very narrow boundary, and you're probably very anxious in relationships. What if I do the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I mess up? What if this person's mad? It's probably my fault. You probably will operate in a lot of relationships, not even just romantic relationships, but relationships generally, through this kind of anxiety lens. And so what we're doing is we're seeking those kinds of affirmations. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like a negative, like I'm going to use them, like maybe the malingering thing, probably. Because obviously if your parents don't care about you or anybody else and you're sick, they'll go, oh, well, too bad, go ahead. Yeah, any of these emotions here, we say more than what's true. Why? Oh, because it makes things simpler. If someone looks at you and, pulls your hand, looks you in the eyes and says, I love you, and you don't love them, what do you say back?
I don't.
No, you don't. No one does. Nobody understands what you mean. No, you probably go, I love you. That's dope. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Oh. And you probably go, I love you too. Do you really? Uh-huh. Why? Oh, because imagine if you say no. Should you say no if you don't? Yeah, probably. But maybe don't throw back at them. They're like, I don't love you, but, figure out a way to communicate with that. But that's hard. Yeah, that's part of maturing. That's part of growing up. Being clear in your communications, being clear with what you think, being clear with what you feel. Because otherwise, you can't blame the person for acting for acting like you guys are in love when you told them that you were. You can't. I know that there are people who, every day when class starts, I ask you guys, how you guys doing today? I don't gauge it off of what you guys say. Like if you guys just go, oh, good, I don't really gauge it off that. I gauge off of how it's said, how many people respond, the tone of all of it. Because many people don't respond. I ask that question, why not? And then, this is a real question. This is a real question. Like, if we're walking, if I see you at Starbucks and I go, how you doing? You probably won't just go. Even a stranger, if I see you at Starbucks, how you doing? They'll probably go, good, or all right, whatever. So why is it that if I walk into a class, and I've known you guys since July, August, September, October, November, December, 5 months. Remember when you guys first came in here? You guys were all this big. And you've grown so much in this time. And many of you have even, I'll leave it at that. And then if I come up to the front of the class and go, how you guys doing? Many of you will just, what is this? Why would you not respond? Does it take a lot every day to go, good? terrible. In between. Just make a noise of some kind. But for some reason we get in this group dynamic, we think, I don't have to answer or whatever. That's what I gauge it off of. How interactive is this class going to be today? You guys are just staring at me. Most of you guys were doing something completely other than what I was just talking about. I've had 2 people. Everybody else hasn't said shit. Does anybody remember how this class started? You wouldn't have noticed, but I did. I put a different quote up on the board. A couple of people reacted. I changed it out. Most of you didn't even notice because most of you were doing something else and talking among yourselves, even though I'd started the class. That tells me something. How's the rest of the class going to go? It tells you the mood when things start. Doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad, just means it's good to know at the beginning. Because it's better to know the truth than to know something else. Because if I come in and I'm like, how you guys doing? You guys are all, fantastic, great. Well, then you can't blame me for acting like everything is fantastic and great. If your friends are asking you, how are you doing? And you're like, really well, thanks for, yeah, I'm doing great. And you can't blame your friends for acting like everything is great. Your parents ask you, how are things? And you say, good, everything's great. You can't blame them for acting like everything's great. You also can't blame them for being angry when they find out that things aren't. And you can't blame your friends when they feel betrayed because they find out that things weren't great. I have a friend right now, he and I are really close. He had me over for Thanksgiving last year. I stopped over there on the way in. Him and his wife, his baby, everything's fantastic. He calls me his brother. He's giving me hugs and told me, you are closer to me than my family. I'm like, dope, man. I love this guy. I won't even tell you his name. I just found out what his real name was. He has a nickname. And then I find out that him and his wife are going through a divorce right now.
Oh.
Yeah. He hasn't told me a word about it. I see him. Hey, what's up, brother? He hasn't mentioned a word about it to me. And I think, that sucks. Because that tells you that maybe we aren't as close as I thought we were. You know? And so you can't blame me for thinking that we were that close when we weren't. But you find this from people. You know, you can't blame the world for acting like everything's great when you constantly tell them that it is. Now that doesn't mean you want to go around and just voice every single complaint, because there are complaints that are our own doing. But you know, if someone says they love you and you tell them that you love them back just because it makes things simpler, just to make things simpler, just to make things simpler, 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 make things simpler. Don't be surprised at the end of all that simplicity, you find yourself in a really, really complicated life, having to undo all those things that you were doing because you thought it just made things easier. At the end of the day, I hate that phrase, at the end of a life for sure, hopefully at the end of every day, literally, you can see how incredibly tangled everything becomes. And you can ask yourself, oh my God, how did things get like this? Because we tried to make life simpler. A simple life is not necessarily a good life. It's probably not. I listened to that video from before break. We were talking about the simple life. And I was saying some of you think about a life where you go to work, come home, watch Netflix with your loved one and hang out, and then, I can't remember the exact phrase, but you said something to the effect of, that sounds like hell. You know, I can hear on the video. And I think, yeah. And yet there will be people who will think the exact same thing, this is hell, and then they'll go through it. I had a good friend of mine. He's like a dad to me. You guys ever hear me say, every day's Christmas? Yeah, it comes from this guy. His name was Andy Sanchez. Andy Sanchez was the baseball coach here, and he used to run the Learning Center. Funny story, because you see that the paradox of it, the parallel of it. When they opened the Learning Center, he became the first director of the Learning Center because the guy who was setting it up was a friend of his. He went to his friend and said, I'm a lousy teacher, so can I run the Learning Center instead? So the guy said, sure. So that's how he became the first director of the Learning Center. The guy married a woman who, I don't think anybody would have heard of it before, Metabolife. It was this old weight loss supplement thing that had ephedrine, and it was making people have heart attacks and shit. Anyway, her family owned it back then, but they sold it off before they got sued for everything. So the family was very wealthy. So his wife was very wealthy. He used to tell me that his wife had more money than God. One day I was on the baseball field with him. I used to coach with him. We were sitting in the dugout. In fact, the field's named after him. And his wife called. And he answers the phone and he says, hang on, it's my wife. He's like, hey, baby, how you doing? I can hear her on the other line. And she's like, hi. He's like, what are you up to? He says, oh, I'm just on I'm on the field with Scanlon, just finishing some things up. What are you up to? And so they're gonna go to a play that night. So she's like, oh, what time did you want to leave for the play tonight? And he goes, well, the play's at 6. So, hey, baby, well, you know that tea place that we love so much? Why don't we leave a little bit early tonight and go to the tea place? Get some tea, and then we can walk over and see the roses outside of and then we can walk over to the play. She's like, oh, that sounds great. He says, oh, beautiful, perfect. He says, all right, hey, I love you. He used to call her his bride, which I thought was so sweet. He's like, it was my bride. And then he hangs up the phone. He's like, I love you. She's like, I love you too. And I go, Andy, how do you, they've been married for 20 years. How do you keep that kind of thing going for 20 years? And he's sitting on the bench and he goes, lie through your fucking teeth. And he shakes his head like this. I'm sitting next to him. He's not even looking at me. I go, what do you mean? And he looks at me. He's got this look at me. He goes, do I look like I want to go drink fucking tea and watch a play? And I said, no, not when you say it like that. And he goes, but I want to go play golf this weekend. And if I want to go play golf, I've got to pretend like I like tea and plays. So he said, so you want to have a happy relationship? Lie through your fucking teeth. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints? I miss Andy. He killed himself on the last day of school, 8 years ago now? Just when you thought the plot could get any more twisted, huh? Yeah, no more tea and plays. Yeah. He threw himself off of his balcony over in downtown, hit the railing on the way down and died. Survived long enough to suffer a bit, but then the megs got there, but he died en route to the hospital. This was the happiest guy you've ever met in your life. When you see him, Andy, how's it going? Oh, every day's Christmas. He used to say that, like that, every day's Christmas, meaning every day was a beautiful gift. This was a guy that after he died, I was talking to one of the custodians, and this is a guy, what the heck was his name? He used to cut the trees around the place, and he wore sunglasses and a low hat. He was about this big, very serious man. His name was Carlos. And I was down in the field one day fixing up the field after Andy died, and he comes over to me and he says, "You'll remember Andy." That's how he talked, very serious. I'm like, "I remember Andy." And he says, "I tell you." This guy one time told me that he cuts the trees. You know why he cuts the trees? He tells me, I cut the trees not for money. For the principle? I cut the trees for my God. This guy takes his job seriously. His whole thing is whatever you do it for the highest possible good. So he tells me this story about Andy, where Andy one day called out to him, "Hey, what time is it?" He had his watch on. And the guy said, Carlos said, "I don't know." So, you don't know? He said, "I don't have a watch." And that's when he got really excited, he'd go, "Wait right there." And the guy tells me, Andy goes into the clubhouse, comes out with his watch, and goes over and gives it to the guy, and says, "You need a watch. You're the custodian. You have to know what time it is." So the custodian says, "And I wear that watch still." And he shows it to me. It's a Rolex. And he gave him a Rolex. If you know what a Rolex is, you know what a Rolex is. And it's great. There's a beautiful life lesson there. The Rolex has scratches on it. Why? He's a custodian. He wears it when he cuts trees and cleans things. Because this is the guy who he doesn't know the price of it, but he knows the value of it. And there are people in life like this. They know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. This is a guy who knows the value of something, man. You know? And so when you hear me say, every day's Christmas, it comes from Andy. Work hard. Good things happen. That came from Andy. If you ever go down to Balboa Park, the museum over there, they have the Hall of Champions, you're going to find Andy in there. He was a CIF touchdown holder, a record holder, until Reggie Bush broke it. And if you know football, then you know football, and you know what that means. This is an incredible human being. I miss him. He was like a dad to me. We used to argue and fight like only children and parents can. But, yeah, man, every day's Christmas. The last thing he ever said to me I was walking over there by the 700 building. I stopped coaching with him. And he goes, Scanlon, are you going to coach with me next year? I said, Andy, I'd rather hang myself than coach with you. Andy started laughing. And he said, Scanlon, that would be reason enough to have you come back. That's funny. And then he killed himself like 4 hours later, 5 hours later. That's not funny. But the paradox there is funny. So what's so funny? Everything. If you can look at it just the right way. We asked Andy, how you doing? Every day is Christmas. It just makes life simpler. How you doing, Andy? Oh, man, come on. Every day is Christmas. Work hard. Good things happen. You know? The lessons were right. The impetus was wrong. And so you can't blame the world for thinking every day is Christmas if you're always telling them that it is. But having said that, I don't know. Maybe if you act like every day is Christmas, it will be. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?